The Low Post Podcast Friday morning. The NBA draft is over. And most of the drama took place before the draft with a mammoth trade from the Boston Celtics and the fire sale Washington Wizards and the Memphis Grizzlies pouncing in. Chris Paul now plays for the Warriors. That's a thing that happened. 2 and 3 in the draft. Much drama. It turned out to be much ado about nothing, as I've predicted and Jonathan Gavoni predicted and Bobby Marks predicted all along on this podcast. Zion stayed. Portland picked at 3. Charlotte took Brandon Miller. There wasn't even that much movement in the first round, as much as I expected anyway. Atlanta stayed put. Utah made all 3 of its picks. The Lakers stayed put. We got a lot to talk about. We got Kirk Goldsberry with a nice denim. Are you Canadian tuxedoing it today?
No, I have some khakis on that prevent me from going full Canadian here today, Zach. But yeah, denim shirt at least.
Grady Dick. Speaking of Canadian tuxedos, different kind of Canadian tuxedo.
He looked like he was going to the Tim Hortons Christmas party up there in Toronto.
Jeremy Woo, draft Nick expert. How are you, sir?
Doing great. The day after the draft is always like I don't know. It's like the first day of summer vacation, kind of.
Coffee number 3 in my New York City. I love New York. I miss New York. Now I'm a boring suburban loser mug. Well, Jeremy, I'll start with you because this is your debut appearance on the Low Post Podcast. This is your time of year. You're already moving on to researching the 2028 draft and things like that. But I want your take. The very first pivot point, the subject of much controversy, jostling in the reporting landscape, was who is Charlotte going to take at number 2? They ended up taking Brandon Miller. A video is circulating from the Hornets watch party in the arena this morning of Hugo the Hornet appearing to be disappointed at the selection of Brandon Miller over Scoot Henderson. There's a whole segment of draft people who are like, huge catastrophic mistake. What are they doing? They're worrying too much about fit. Then there's a lot of people who are like, no, like we think they're kind of equal prospects and maybe he does fit them better and talent is the same. Where do you fall on this choice?
I mean, look, I think there's a reason why this is a move that we could see coming, right? Like if it had been something that was so out of left field that we had never seen it coming and never considered it, right? Like, then I don't think it would have been, we wouldn't have felt as secure in that this is going to happen, right? I mean, I think I'm more of in the camp of them being relatively equal in a lot of ways. And I just think it depends on what you need. What Miller is, which is, at his size, being a guy who can really make shots and people think he can be really dynamic, and he had a great season in college. And there's nothing like a dominant college season to win scouts over, right? Because you know what you're getting. You've seen it at that level before. They know how to evaluate it. And not that worked against Scoot, but it was like, I think back in October when we saw Scoot have that like transcendent game against Wembanyama in Vegas, and we were there, and we thought, oh wow, this guy is on this crazy trajectory too. And then that wasn't what happened. And no one really talked about it during the season, but he didn't have like a banner year, and it was his second year in the G League. Again, he's still young, and this is not like hating on Scoot, but the notion that this was like some unequivocal Scoot choice was also equally as flawed as saying Brandon is 100% the choice, right? I mean, it's give or take, but ultimately, I think it landed where we thought it would.
Obviously, the more interesting storyline for the broader NBA is what this means for Damian Lillard. I said all along, I expected nothing would surprise me. I wouldn't have bet money on it. I don't bet money on anything, really. Poker now and then. I would have bet money on Portland just keeping the pick, because I think the players they may have coveted in a trade involving number 3 were not going to be available to them. And the players that might have been available to them, and I don't even really think like any of these discussions got super serious or maybe even happened in a real way to begin with, but just if they're spitballing internally about like who might be realistically available, I don't think they were going to trade the pick for those players. I don't think the Zion thing was ever super duper real. I just think it's too it's just too dicey of a decision for everybody involved, the Pelicans and any team who might be trading for him. It's just too hard to do, particularly on a clock like this. And so they end up just keeping the pick. And as stewards of the Portland Trailblazers, you can understand why Joe Cronin and the front office and the ownership and all that are like, yeah, Dame, we owe it to you, but we also owe it to the team in 2035 or whatever to make the correct decision today. And we think this is the correct decision. And this is the third path. This is the third path that we talked about 2 weeks ago on this podcast. Make the pick and say to Dame in the aftermath, just like, I don't believe there's a school of thought around the NBA that the Blazers secretly hope that Damian Lillard requests a trade, that they don't want to be the team. They don't want to be the quote unquote bad guy. They would be happy if Dame did that. I actually don't believe that's true. I know the people in the Blazers front office. I think they're honest people. And I think when Joe Cronin says we want to win a championship with Damian Lillard, he means it. We want Damian Lillard to retire a Blazer. He said that last night. He means it. I think he really just thinks Scoot Henderson's the best guy for them to take long-term, and that there is enough maneuverability around the edges somehow in free agency, somehow with future trades, to construct a legitimate, not just, if everything goes right, they could be the 5th seed or the 6th seed, but like a legitimate good team around Damian Lillard. And right now that team is, let's just have fun and assume that Scoot Henderson walks in the door and starts. That's more fun to me. So their starting 5 is Lillard, Scoot, Shaedon Sharpe, I guess. Let's assume they re-sign Jeremy Grant. Nurkic is the starting center. Simons moves to a 6-man rule. You got some guys off the bench like Jabari Walker. You re-sign Thibault, maybe re-sign Drew Eubanks. You know, who knows what else is out there for them. Like, that's a decent to good team. The team with player X in Scoot's place is probably better for the short term, but the Blazers decided player X, whoever was available to us, that team is not better enough to justify the pick. And then after the draft, right on cue came the ominous Chris Haynes tweet. Damian Lillard has not had any recent communication with the Portland Trailblazers involving the draft, free agency, or his future, league sources tell NBA and TNT and Bleacher Report. Joe Cronin said that they had a long talk on Tuesday, which is 48 hours before the draft. I don't know what soon or recent really means. I think it's not a secret Dame would have preferred. I think he's probably excited to play with Scoot Henderson, but also would be more excited to play with Bam Adebayo, which was never happening in a million years. The Heat are still laughing about that report right now. Both of those things can be true, but here we are. Mr. Goldsberry, what are you looking for the Blazers this offseason? Like, they're betting on themselves, and I think they're also betting on the league's increased parity and betting against the Western Conference outside of Denver, who everybody knows is going to be a juggernaut.
Yeah, in a weird way, Zach, their team building challenge in 2023 kind of got harder when they elevated in the lottery. And I say that because if they had gotten 5 or 6 or 7 in the lottery, and Jeremy can chime in on the value of those slots. But when you're looking at a player like Scoot, that's a different equation. Now your math is different than if you're looking at one of these Thompsons. And I think that was really a pivotal moment here. Getting off of the 5 or 6 pick in this draft is much easier to do for a front office than getting off of Scoot Henderson, whose ceiling is immense. His likely outcomes may not be all NBA, but his ceiling certainly is, Zach. And I think when you're looking at a player like that in a smaller market in the Western Conference, you have to take that player. And I think that's what sort of forced their hand here in a weird way and caused an additional set of conflicts with Damian Lillard's camp. Is now we have number 3, Damian. We have to either get an immense superstar back, an all NBA level player back in return, which wasn't going to happen, as you pointed out, or we're taking this pick. And now, in a weird way, their rise to number 3 changed the equation. So I think now, if I had to say, we're looking at realistic chances that Damian gets traded in the next few months.
I don't think there's any question that there's a realistic chance of that. And certainly the Heat, maybe the Nets, other teams are sitting there waiting, biding their time. But I do think the Blazers are going to take an honest shot at it. I believe them when they say what they say. So I think they're going to take an honest shot at it. You know, I just don't know. I don't know what the real, I mean, they can still trade Simons and future picks, so they have to clear up that Bulls pick that they owe with a lot of protections. To me, the wild card is Nurkic. I don't think Nurkic, I think Nurkic has taken like a quarter step back in the last couple of years on both ends of the floor. And I just don't know if he's the guy. I wanted them to go after Porzingis. That ship is obviously sailed. Jeremy, what are your thoughts on this, and or how ready is Chris Murray, the guy they took at 23, Keegan's brother? Is he ready to play?
Yeah, I like that pick for them. And I almost think like that pick kind of read as a pick that kind of splits the difference, where you're kind of keeping Dame happy. Like, hey, we got you this older guy who looks a lot like that guy who's really good in Sacramento, who is going to be, hopefully helpful. He can make shots. Like, he's got size. Like, Keegan can physically play in the NBA. I think Chris is a little smaller, just off my eye test. That was how I always told them apart at Iowa. But I think that was a good pick, and I think it's decent value there. And I think if they hadn't taken him, I think Sacramento was probably taking him at 24 to reunite the brothers. So, yeah, I just think, to your point, Kirk, like it's so hard to trade out of a top 3 pick, no matter what the draft is, but also in a draft like this, where so much of the dialogue is just that there is this top group of 3. And from an optics standpoint, like coming back off that for anything less than like a star level guy who's really going to move the needle is tough. And I think with knowing what we know about Portland, and like you said, like it's kind of hard to like, with an iconic player, it's hard to like nudge them out the door. You can't like do, you know what I mean? I don't think that's what they're doing, but it's also hard to just punt on this chance to maybe have the next centerpiece of the next era and walk away from it.
Yeah, you talk to a lot of executives around the league about the Blazers situation, and you hear a lot. I'm sure, Kirk, you hear this too. You hear a lot of like, well, I can't believe they haven't traded him already. Like, it's so obvious they should have traded him for the bounty they could have traded him for. Look at what the Wizards did with Bradley Beal as a cautionary tale. And I'm like, I get it. Like, I get it. I get the cold, calculated way of thinking. Like, you sell early, you get the bounty, you don't end up selling late and getting 70% of what you would have got before. But Damian Lillard is not Bradley Beal. Damian Lillard is the greatest Portland Trailblazer of all time. Yeah. They have had real playoff success with him somewhat recently, not the last couple years, but real playoff success in the tougher conference. The Wizards haven't had real playoff success since like 2017, when they took the Celtics to 7 games and the Kelly Olynyk game happened. The Isaiah Thomas series and playoff run happened. And I've always said the Beal Wall playoff runs in 14, 15, 16, not 16, they didn't make it, 17, are underrated. Like, there was a lot of respect around the league for how dynamic that backcourt was, and how Bradley Beal at like age 20 walked into the playoffs, walked into the Tom Thibodeau defense, what was left of it anyway, in 2014. Was like, I'm not afraid of any of this. I'm ready. Like, that dude's a big game player, but he hasn't done what Damian Lillard has done. And he had a no trade clause. Like, it's just a totally distinct situation. And I understand the Blazers trying to find a moment with this guy. And I just don't know. I don't know what the pathway is, but if you're going to sit here and say what a disaster, they should have traded the 3rd pick, you got to tell me for who. You got to tell me for who, because I don't think, and I think the Blazers knew this, I don't think they were getting Mikal Bridges, who Dame has name checked. I'm not sure there was even a real discussion or any offers were made. I just think they knew the Nets wouldn't do that. So, like, why are we talking about it? The Toronto guys, OG Anunoby has injury issues off and on. We're always waiting on the leap. The leap, it's kind of like little mini steps and half steps and side steps. And Pascal Siakam, I think Chris Haynes had to tweet yesterday about how, there was sort of an ominous, like, he may not re-sign wherever he gets traded. Adebayo, no. People floated Paul George's name, not in the league. I'm not reporting anything. I don't think the Clippers, Paul George stuff, I don't really know what happened. I don't think there was any like traction anywhere. You can't trade Scoot Henderson for Paul George at age 33, eligible in September for a 4-year max extension. You just can't do it. That's just like, and he's hurt frequently too. You just like, that's not responsible management. You want to tell me Zion? I don't think that was ever real. So who's the guy? If you're going to trash him,
right?
Who's the guy? Now, the challenge is how you take that team and make it good enough. And it just might be like they're banking on Simons and Sharp to make leaps. I don't know. It's going to be tough. Any other thoughts, Kirk?
Yeah, well, it's like what we learned from Golden State. It's like it's hard to run a good team or a great team on two different timelines. And that's where they are now. Their two most important players in the organization are at very different parts of their arcs, Zach. And like I said, Golden State couldn't pull that off. And additionally, like I said, they get Scoot Henderson essentially with some lottery luck. If there's one organization that knows what a incredibly athletic, high ceiling guard can do for the Portland Trailblazers, it's the Portland Trailblazers. And to turn a blind eye to that, to get off of that. And I think you nailed it, Zach. You have to tell me who. Right, cool. In a vacuum, we're going to get an all. No, that wasn't the thing. There was no option here. And the best team building play for this organization. When are they going to get another top 3 pick, by the way? The best team building play for this franchise in the 2020s was to take Scoot Henderson at number 3 last night. That's the best move for the future of the Portland Trailblazers. So I think that's why they did it.
I just brief aside on the Clippers because I just brought it up. I just might as well hit it now. I think something is going on there. I don't know what the something is, but what I said 3 days ago or whenever I last did a podcast, I think from what I've heard, when Mark Stein put that tweet out that they were giving off the impression of gauging Paul George's trade value, what I said that day was the buzz I had heard was something went on within the Clippers organization that at least a portion of their brain trust has come to the conclusion that if Kawhi in July and Paul George in September walk in the door and say, hey, where's our 4-year max extension? We want a 4-year max extension. The Clippers in at least one or both cases are prepared to actually do what real professional organizations do, which is negotiate and not just be like, oh, you guys never play? Sure, here's all the money for all the years, which is typically what happens with superstar players. They get all the money and all the years, and there's not a negotiation. You just get it. And I think the Clippers, again, the buzz I heard, this is just what I heard. I don't know exactly what the truth is, but the buzz that I heard was that the Clippers are like prepared to say, hey, how about to either one or both? I don't know, a 2+1. A Chris Paul style deal with a partial in year 3, something to acknowledge the reality that you don't play enough and that we have not had enough success with the two of you, considering the outlay of everything we gave up to get you. Now, if that's true, then I would guess the agents who represent those players already know that. And if that's true today, everyone has some understanding of like how those discussions might go. And if you're willing to do that, you have to be willing to acknowledge that there is a universe in which those discussions go badly, and you have to turn to the next alternative. And we know what that alternative would be. I think that's all that's going on with the Clippers. I don't think there was any like Knicks talk with Paul George that got really serious, or if any seriousness, maybe any at all. Anything like that. That's my Clippers. Any Clippers? I do think, though, this now becomes one of the biggest looming stories of the offseason that maybe people just haven't put on their map yet.
I think, Steve Ballmer wants to win championships, Zach. And I think you and I, in the summer of 2019, if we can bring ourselves back to when we were awoken in the middle of the night with some blockbuster news, we thought this team was destined for more than they've got in the last 4 years. I think the road has just gotten tougher, and the track record has not really been that impressive. I think if you're Steve Ballmer and the leadership of this organization, you are now looking at a reality where even if everything goes right, are you a contender in the Western Conference? I think you and I both think they are, but the reality is things don't go right. Nobody's ever playing. And I think that is set in 4 years later, that now we're gonna double down on this thing that is as unreliable as anything else in the NBA. I just don't think that Steve Ballmer wants to do that. So I think you're exactly right. I don't know when it happens, but I think sort of a vibe shift is coming in Clipperland, where we're not married to these two wings to build our 2020s championship chase around.
Well, there's also the new arena thing that is coming, and they definitely don't want to be bad for that. There's also the fact that, like, if they ever got to the point of trading these guys, I don't know how you trade for Kawhi Leonard and re-sign him for any number of years. Like, I just don't know how you do that. And yeah, when he came back, he was reliable the last 40 games of the season. He was absolutely incredible in the playoffs until he got hurt again.
Yep.
Right when they amped up the minutes and the intensity. And I think Lawrence Frank talked about last night, he might be ready for training camp. Like, that's great. I don't know how you put a value on that. All right, let's switch gears. And Jeremy, you have any Clippers thoughts?
Not really, but I do think, to your point, like about the arena, it's like it's hard for them to go full reset. Their picks are all over the place. Like, I do think there's something that has to change, whether you move one of those guys. But I'm with you. Yeah,
you just can't put yourself in that jail for 4 more years each at 50 million, whatever a pop. You just can't do it. Like, I said this when the season ended. I was like, you have to say no. You have to stand up and say this. We can't do it. Okay. We'll get back to the draft shortly. Two, I would classify them as strange trades preceded the draft. The first, which we will start with, was a 3-team trade in which the Boston Celtics traded Marcus Smart, the heart and soul, green hair, taking charges, flipping and flopping all over the place, making big shots, taking big shots just after the buzzer in big playoff games, making big passes to Jason Tatum at the buzzer of the Nets game. Just a gutsy player. We all love Marcus Smart. For Kristaps Porzingis, the number 25 pick in last night's draft, which they turned into 92 second-round picks in what John Hollinger aptly described as a tribute to the cascading David Kahn draft of many eons ago. And the Warriors' top 4 protected 2024 pick, which is an interesting little piece of business for them. That's what the Celtics got. The Wizards got Tyus Jones on an expiring contract, and the number 35 pick last night, I think. And the Grizzlies got Marcus Smart and traded those 2 first-round picks we talked about to the Boston Celtics. The Celtics angle is obviously the biggest one here. Just give me the initial thoughts, Kirk. And you're a New Englander. What do you think?
Yeah. I was shocked at the return. Number one, oh wow, Marcus Smart is worth this relative to some of the other players we saw moved around the last few weeks. Okay, you're getting Porzingis and 2 firsts. Great job by the front office. I think there's also like sort of a cultural risk is how I would characterize it. Smart has, as you said, been called the heart and soul. Big week for the term heart and soul. I've heard it. I've heard it a lot, referencing Marcus Smart, but that's exactly what he's been for 9 years. And his arrival in Boston, Zach, as you know, just happened to coincide with a resurrection for that franchise. He might not be the best player of this recent run, but he's certainly one of the sort of spiritual leaders. I think the risk here is we're bringing in Porzingis for a world where Al Horford's role in the rotation diminishes. Joe Mazzulla loves stretching out the court. Porzingis does that. He shoots threes as well as almost any 7-footer. And he's going to be able to extend that. One thing I haven't heard talked about enough, Zach, is that the arrival of Sam Cassell and Charles Lee, I think, gives Brad Stevens a little more confidence in the sort of culture or the leadership in the locker room or in the huddle. Remember, Joe Mazzulla was in a tough spot last year. They had to sort of build this coaching staff from scratch at the wrong time of the calendar. They're able to correct for that. I think the building of this coaching staff has been an underreported story. I think it makes Boston a lot better. And I think it makes them able to sort of offset the spiritual loss, if you want to call it that, of Marcus Smart, where you have Sam Cassell. I mean, really the caricature of swagger in the NBA in my lifetime, in one of them at least. And I think that's a big part of why they thought they could get rid of Smart. The other really fascinating thing I want to hear your take, Zach, is like that other deal that almost happened. Do you think they would have rather gotten off of Brogdon? Can we read that? Is that a fair reading?
Yes, correct.
Okay.
And Brogdon's injury is something of a mystery. You know, Windhorst described it as potentially serious enough that it would be very hard to trade him. And obviously it was very hard to trade him. Adam Himmelsbach of the Globe reported that there's a possibility he actually doesn't miss any games. I've been told that there's just a wide array of possible outcomes here. And one of them could be, as Adam reported, that he's healthy sooner than expected. But yeah, of course they would rather trade Malcolm Brogdon, than Marcus Smart. Jeremy, did you have any initial reactions to this before I go on my spiel?
I guess I just think it feels to me like they know that they have to change something. You make enough of these deep runs, and I mean, it's in some ways it's kind of interesting, the parallel with that in the Clippers, when you have two really, really high paid wings, which is a formula that doesn't always work when there's some overlap in the skill set and how they mesh. And obviously Boston has more time and they're younger, but you have this massive Jaylen Brown contract coming.
And it's coming, by the way. It's coming. That drama I expect to resolve. I don't know how quickly, but I expect it to resolve with Jaylen Brown getting the massive Supermax contract from the Boston Celtics.
Yeah. So I think that's part of the point of like them not only doing what they did, but also just accumulating all these million picks. It's like they know they're going to need cheap young players and they're going to have to draft well. Because if you're going to be on this timeline with Tatum and Brown both, and knowing the way the CBA changes things, they're going to have to really hit on some of these picks.
So, Kirk, you started by saying great value for Marcus Smart. And I agree. Getting a big man a young big man still coming off a career year, had a legit all-star case. I thought didn't pick him for my team, but I thought he was considered. Honorable mention. And 2 first-round picks, including a Warriors pick that has some real upside. Like the Warriors are old and got older in the trade we're going to talk about. Got older and a little less punchier in the trade we're going to talk about shortly. That's great value for Marcus Smart. And I obviously I get the fit. Porzingis is an elite stretch 5. There were moments, now you've got to go back 4 years for him now for the most part, where Luka and Porzingis, like in the bubble, looked like, oh, this is the vision for this combination. This is trouble. This is trouble. Like the Clippers don't really have a great answer for this. And then Porzingis got hurt, of course, in that series. And you can envision Tatum and Porzingis and even Brown and Porzingis having that kind of chemistry. You can tell me that, there is some irony in your insurance policy for older and injury-prone big men being another injury-prone big man. Like just keep getting guys who get injured all the time. Probably some of them will be healthy at some point. Not Al Horford's never injured, but you know what I mean. I get the insurance policy thing. I get that he can play with Horford. Maybe that's ends up being their starting 5 is Derek White, the Jays, Horford, and Porzingis. The Celtics think he can play with Robert Williams. I'm sure they'll try it. I'm just skeptical that that's going to be a thing. So I get and his rim protection is elite. If you play him and Robert Williams together, one of them guards the center, one of them guards the worst shooter on the other team. You drop back, you rope. I get all that. something in my tummy doesn't like this one so much for Boston. And it's not just the heart and soul thing. It starts with this. Marcus Smart was the best passer on a team that is a bad passing team. Right. Porzingis is just a blah passer. I do think he's gotten a little bit more decisive and confident with his reads in the post. And when he gets the ball, like on the pick and pop, he would even sometimes like work a little give and go with Luka in those plays. And in Washington, I think his decisiveness really amped up. And they have confidence in the Horford, Time Lord passing, from those positions. I just, of all the teams to take a step back in playmaking, this was the one that made me the most nervous. And he's their screener for Tatum. He's their pick and roll ball handler with Tatum in that 2-man game. And yeah, Derek White can do a lot of that. Derek White can do a lot of the same stuff. He can screen on and off the ball. He can do all the pet actions that the Celtics like to do with the Jays. But, I do think Marcus Smart's passing and playmaking will be missed. He was an option in the post for them in a way Derek White can't be. I think his size on defense was obviously critical to their ability to switch everything. Derek White can't really function the same way, certainly can't guard up several positions like Marcus Smart can. And I don't trust Porzingis to stay healthy. I understand he had the most efficient post-up season of his career with Washington last year. I don't trust those numbers to sustain. And like so many of his post-ups are still giving the ball at the nail. He gets to like do his stuff and rise up and shoot over a smaller guy on a switch. Like that's cool. Some seasons that'll work really well. Some seasons there'll be slumps. I don't think Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum want to like watch him do that very often, at least when both of them are on the court. Maybe it's different with one of them on the court. I'm not sure that double center look with Time Lord and Porzingis is going to be a thing. Obviously, Brogdon is injured, and that would if he's out longer than expected, that's 2 guards out the door. You keep Peyton Pritchard. Grant Williams seems likely to not be on the team next year. They'll explore everything, but I have the Celtics at like 170 million for just 10 or 11 guys right now, which means even using the tax mid-level is going to get them close to the second apron. I don't know. I get it. I think the Celtics are going to be awesome either way. Like their 2 best players are this good. Derek White is amazing. They have good depth still. Porzingis has always left me a little cold as a player. Yeah. And something about this trade leaves me a little cold about just, it's not the heart and soul stuff. It's just the playmaking deficit, the defensive identity shift. I don't love it. I don't love it.
How about instead of heart and soul, it's heart and defense? How about that? Because I think they got worse on defense. Hot take, dude. They lost the defensive player of the year from 2 years ago. But you said tactically, Marcus allows them to do a lot, like Time Lord. And I think when Ime Udoka really unlocked this team a couple years ago after they sort of struggled out of the gate, it was a defensive story. It was finally getting used to switching everything. Rob Williams was a big part of that. I've never liked Porzingis as a contemporary NBA defender. I think Dallas got better on defense when they got rid of Porzingis. I think this team needs to be good on both ends of the court to get to where they want to go. And if I want to be critical of this trade, and again, I started by saying they got a nice haul.
Great haul. It's great. They're going to be awesome either way. That's the luxury of having Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown.
Are they still a top 5 defense? That's a big question here. That was a defining aspect of them when I thought they were ascending towards title contender status in the Udoka year. And I'm not sure they still are that great on defense. That's what I'm looking at with this new look Celtics roster.
You know the word that I would use? Porzingis is just, there's something like sluggish about him that I don't like. It's like sluggish. Marcus Smart is like anti-sluggish in every possible way.
Well, last night we said he's got that dog in him, right? That was another turn of phrase that's had a big couple of weeks, Jeremy. Am I right? And I think there's no question, if there's one NBA player that quote unquote has that dog in him, it might be the guy that just went to Memphis from Boston.
And Jeremy, you said like they just needed to shake things up. And I agree, like something had grown stale with the team and the way their offense runs late in games and all that. Anytime we need to shake things up becomes like a guiding principle, I get a little nervous because sometimes you do things that are just, you do them for the sake of doing something. And I'm not saying this is the case here, because I think Porzingis is a good fit in lots of ways. I just, something leaves me cold. Something leaves me cold about this move.
Yeah.
For Washington, good value. People are killing the Wizards for like, I can't believe they only got a first round pick or whatever for all these guys. Beal out the door, Porzingis out the door, Chris Paul in the door, then out the door through the revolving door. Okay, Brad Beal had a no trade clause, and they got a bunch of second round picks and a bunch of swaps. They got everything Phoenix could have. He had a no trade clause. People are underestimating like what that is. That's the whole thing. That's it.
Exactly.
Zach, that's exactly what I kept circling. This is the week I learned how expensive a no trade clause was.
That's
in
it.
the
So
NBA.
throw it out the door. Porzingis, they got the 35th pick, and they got Tyus Jones, who they can flip anytime they want for another good, maybe first round pick. Probably, or they could just keep him and be like, Tyus Jones is really good. For a guy who we just talked about, Porzingis is fine. He also had suitors in free agency waiting for him and could have just opted out and left them with zero. And then they got real stuff for Chris Paul, semi-real stuff, at least. Like, I just don't, the idea that the Wizards, like the Wizards missed out on a bonanza of trade assets 3 years ago. The Wizards didn't miss out on a bonanza of trade assets this week. The Wizards this week got what they could get and moved on with life. Jeremy, what do you think of the Marcus Smart fit for Memphis and what they gave up?
I mean, I had heard that Memphis was chasing a veteran guard. I think clearly they feel like they probably, considering sort of the instability of the last year with all the stuff with Ja, like they need to, I think, try to get more experience in the room. I think that's a win for them, whatever price they had to pay to do it. I think I think he'll fit well in a complementary sense too, giving them more of a defensive look in the backcourt that they maybe didn't have. Bane's a good player. He's not like a great defender. So you plug in Smart, you have those three guys, you can play them all together if you want to go smaller. I think it gives them a lot of options. And I liked it for Memphis. I mean, you got to do something, and the something is not, start over. It's just, what can we do in a reasonable way that sort of helps our team grow, because this is a huge year for them. I think personally, like it's, they're gonna have to prove a lot, and Ja's gonna have to come back and prove a lot. And I think having Smart will stabilize, at least, especially with him missing the first quarter of the season.
This was the first deal maybe in the Zach Kleiman regime in Memphis where, from just an asset perspective, they actually kind of took a risk and put a lot out there, put real stuff out there. And maybe from just like a pure asset valuation perspective, quote unquote, lost the trade. I'm not sure that that's really true, but Tyus Jones is good. And they gave up 2 real picks for Marcus Smart, who's on a great contract. That's part of the reason why maybe they didn't, quote unquote, even lose the trade. Maybe it was a tie or whatever you want to say. So I guess their starting 5, when everyone's back, is Morant, Baines, Smart, Jaren Jackson Jr. And I'm curious about that 5th spot because, you can pencil in Steven Adams. That's the incumbent starter when he's healthy. Morant, Smart, and Adams is just not a lot of shooting. It's a lot of toughness, and boy, are they going to be unpleasant to play against if they ever have Smart and Adams out there together. That's going to be nasty. And Jaren Jackson Jr. blocking everything into the backboard. It's not a ton of shooting. I'm interested in that 5th spot and how they dole out the minutes there. Brandon Clark, Jaren Jackson has always been a winning combination for them, but just Smart and Morant are below average shooters for their positions. You throw in a true center, like the old Memphis problem of we can't score in the half court. That's been their issue 100%. In the playoffs 2 years running. I will say, I would just keep an eye on the Grizzlies. They don't have cap room, I don't think, but I would keep an eye on them as a sign and trade. destination. If there's anybody in the free agency market that they end up liking, they have a lot of little contracts, not little, mid-sized contracts they can aggregate attached to good players. I would just keep an eye on that. Should we move on to Chris Paul?
I want to ask Jeremy one question about the Wizards, who I thought took the biggest swing in the draft maybe last night. Maybe had the biggest reach.
Let's
Jeremy.
do it. We
can't get out of Wizards talk. # Wizards talk for those of us who celebrate. What did you think of the? Do you want to try, Zach, or do you want me to try my debut pronunciation of Bilal Coulibaly?
I think you nailed it. I think you nailed it.
You got it. You got it.
A reach or not? Do you love that pick or do you hate that?
Hold on.
Pick?
Let's go over the details. The Wizards had the 8th pick and the Pacers had the 7th pick. And the Wizards wanted Bilal Coulibaly, Victor Wembanyama's teammate in France, and paid 2 second-round picks to flip with Indiana from 8 to 7, with Indiana going from 7 to 8 and picking Jarris Walker. So that's the trade. And yes, that is well above where even optimistic mock drafts had Coulibaly. So now with that said, give me the take.
So I think there was kind of this growing thought over the course of this week. It's like, would the Wizards actually take Coulibaly? Because, with Will Dawkins going there from Oklahoma City, people kind of have a sense of who their type of player is going to be. Now you have those two teams kind of like jostling in the same range of the draft. My understanding of sort of what happened with this trade is that I think Oklahoma City was very close to trading in at 7, is what I heard. And so I think Washington was worried about getting sniped, right? And then you have Utah sitting right behind them, and Utah is another team that likes Coulibaly. And I think Washington had to make sure they got the guy they wanted. And I don't think it was too big a price to pay to move up. It was a couple second-round picks. I think that's okay if that's really your guy and you believe in him. And they just got there. They got a long timeline to do this. They've torn it down. I like the swing. Coulibaly is an awesome story. And I've said this before, but like when I was over in France in November, like that guy was so far away from looking like a top 10 pick. Just what I saw playing in the I talked about this with Brian Windhorst, the Espoir game, and with the basically the JV team of their team. By the end of the year, he was the second or third best player on the team with Victor in the playoffs. So I think he really used this to his advantage, and it's a big swing for Washington, and it's going to take him a year or two to really I think become what he a shadow of what he's going to be, because he's going to have to get better playing on the ball. But people think he can be a playmaker. He had a late growth spurt, was a point guard growing up, and now has this amazing physical tools, whatever you want to call it. So I like it for them. And again, if that's your guy and you're starting the rebuild, take your guy. I don't mind paying to make sure you get him if you're worried about the trade.
I really missed out on the late growth spurt in life. I've been 5'11" and 3/4 since I was 16 years old. It just didn't happen for me. Imagine if I were 16 years old and suddenly I was 6'6". Yeah, late growth spurt for Zach Lowe. Looking good out there.
You were a late riser though, Zach. I will give you that. Just like Coulibaly, you were a second rounder for a while there, but now, man, you're a clear top 10 pick in my world. So
I agree, by the way, Jeremy. 2 seconds is not a lot to get squeezed out of in that kind of situation. I always think back to the infamous Elfrid Payton, Dario Saric draft where Philly knew Orlando wanted Elfrid Payton and took him at 10, and with Orlando was sitting at 12. I was like, oh, you really want Elfrid Payton? How badly? How about first round pick badly? And it turned out to be a high first round pick too. So 2 seconds to move up 2 spots when you just got 6 of them from the Phoenix Suns, who have literally nothing. I guess they have cash. Did the Suns send all their cash in that trade, or do they have any cash? They have I would just think it would be funny if they had $100 left over. It's let's just keep $100 in the kitty just in case. By the way, it would be really funny. And I asked around about this a little bit last night and got nothing. Just nothing. there's got to be a team. There has to be one team who was like, and I'm not even going to name a team because I got nothing, like I said, but there has to be one team who called the Spurs and were like, we'll give you everything just to see. There had to be one GM who was curious enough to just be like, let's offer them our best player. Say we have like an all NBA level player who's young-ish, and we have all our picks, and we have like some extra picks. Like what would it, if I were a GM, I would have just called him in like, you can have this guy, this guy, this guy, 8 first-round picks, 7 second-round picks, and 4 first-round pick swaps. So 15 draft picks, 4 swaps, 2 all-stars, like just to see. So I asked around and I heard, no such calls were made. I'm like, that can't be true. Some team must have done it.
I don't think so, man, because everybody knew this was like the perfect Spur from the jump. I mean, this is like an international. The Spurs dynasty, Zach, as I always say, is built on lottery luck. They'll be the first to admit it. It's built on international players and incredible big men. And this guy checks all those boxes. You know, I'm biased, but Wembanyama was born to be a San Antonio Spur. I think other teams around the league wouldn't even pick up the phone and say, hey, Pop, you ready to part with this this logical extension of what you've built for the last 25 years?
I would have taken Pop out for a meal, bottle of wine number 2, and been like, so how about it? 15 draft picks. This guy, I don't know. This just, I would have done it just to see. By the way, the Pacers have $30-something million in cap room. And I don't think this would happen. But if there's a cap room team, just the cap room teams, forget the sign and trade landscape. If there's a cap room team where I'm like, that would be kind of a fun place for Draymond Green to go, it's Indiana. With Miles Turner as a stretch 5 and Tyrese Halliburton as a point guard splitting playmaking duties with Draymond Green, that would, and a team that has nothing at the 4. Now, I don't, maybe they're going to get something. What can Walker play any 4, Jeremy?
Yeah, that's probably what he'll do.
That's
I think
the
that
vision,
was their,
right?
That's why he was their guy. They wanted a 4 all year, and he can play make a little bit. He's not like
he's young,
you know.
He's young. Let's have some fun in the meantime.
Right.
But that said, I think the other big mega deal of the Golden State Warriors trading Jordan Poole and a top 20 protected 2030 first round pick and a second round pick in some year. I don't remember. I think 2027 for Chris Paul. If Draymond Green doesn't come back now, I would be absolutely blown away, because if there's a win now move, this is a win now move. If there's a let's not quite nuke the 2-timeline plan, but we're going to set it a little bit in flames. We still have Kuminga and Moody, but Poole gone, Wiseman gone. Half of the 2-timeline plan is gone. And now a 38-year-old point guard who's injured all the time in the playoffs is there in its place. I mentioned Golden State as sort of an aside as a potential Chris Paul destination, but I did not think that was going to be where he would go. I focused on the LA teams. I know that I've heard that Chris was really intrigued and excited about the possibility of reuniting with the Clippers and sort of the poetry of maybe finishing his career, trying to take them where they haven't gotten and take himself where he's never gotten. But I heard yesterday, like, that once this is like a double shock of, wait, I'm on the Wizards, now I'm on the Warriors. I've heard he's excited about the opportunity here. It's a strange fit in just about everywhere. I mentioned both of these trades are like, what? Like strange. This is about as strange just as a stylistic, ideological clash that I can recall. Kirk, what were your initial thoughts on this?
I mean, WTF was my first thought. I think I'm not alone there. I mean, Chris Paul and the Golden State Warriors have a checkered past. I don't think they really liked each other in the peak of that Houston rivalry.
There were like 9 memes and quotes that all can be used. It's not just the Steve Kerr laughing one, which was an all-timer. It's there's like 20 of them. It just never ends.
Yeah, Wendy had this point on our draft show last night about how when the Warriors dispatched the Rockets in that crazy series, there was the F Chris Paul chant in the locker room from the Warriors players directed toward the Rockets locker room after they had won the series. I mean, this is really interesting, but I think there is, if it's a salary dump of Poole. I think you're exactly right. When you're looking at it from the Warriors perspective, this is blowing up the 2-timeline thing. Just like Damian Lillard saying, I don't want to go out there and play with kids. I think quietly behind the scenes, some of the leadership on that Golden State roster was saying
quietly.
Hey, I'm just being diplomatic. But I think that Jordan Poole and Wiseman were two of the biggest players in that second timeline, if not the two biggest. They're gone. Chris Paul is in. From an analytics perspective, Zach, one of the big signature elements of this Warriors team the last few years is this. They have lost the non-Curry minutes on the basketball court drastically. In the 2023 playoffs, they were a positive team with Curry on the court, and negative 17.7 in this last postseason when he sat. That was a caricature of a larger trend we've seen, not only in the regular season this past season, but when they won it all. They were a negative team without Steph Curry. I think at very least, if indeed Chris Paul cracks this rotation, Zach, he can come in and run that second unit. I'm not shoveling dirt on Chris Paul. This guy is still a fantastic offensive player, and I think he can solve one of those big problems they've had with Steph Curry off the court. They can win those minutes with Chris Paul in there.
Yeah. I also think it's time for Chris Paul to play like 24 minutes a game or something like that. And this is a place where he can do it. And just when you got to amp it up in the playoffs, if you can amp it up in the playoffs. It is a salary dump of Jordan Poole. And it's not even like this. It's a top 20 protected pick. Like it could end up being a fake pick. Like they could end up dumping Jordan Poole, whose contract could age well. I mean, I'm sure he'll average like 27 a game next year in Washington.
Right.
But for a fake first, and they give themselves a shot depending on Klay's number to come back, assuming he comes back, and Draymond's number to come back, assuming he comes back, at like being around the second apron going forward, maybe under it, maybe a little over it. They give themselves a shot to maneuver a little bit. I just think it's a crazy fun opportunity for Chris Paul, because if you talk to Chris, I remember interviewing Chris in Houston about when his first year there, about sitting down with him at the facility and talking about, well, Chris, I mean, you love, like, you're the master manipulator. Like, you want to walk the ball up the floor, dribble it a lot of times, yell at everyone where they're supposed to go and like get them in position and run a pick and roll and do your thing. Now you're playing with James Harden, and like you got to do off the ball stuff and get the ball moving, whatever. And he did not like the line of questioning. And in a very Chris Paul way, it was like, I'm way more adaptable than you think. I don't want to be the control freak guy. Like if I played on a team that was fast, I'm happy to throw hit ahead passes. I'm one of the best in the league at that. I'm happy to run. I'm happy to run. Like if my team wants to run floppy a million times, he asked me like, what do you think the most common play was we ran in with the Clippers? What do you think, Zach? Floppy, not pick and roll, floppy for JJ Redick. Like if we want to run that play a million times, I'm fine with that. He's like a physical screener. Like if you, I'm sure he's thinking right now, like if they want to put me out there with Curry and Klay Thompson a lot and use me as the screener and have me hit people, like I can do that. I'm happy doing that. He prides himself on an adaptability that I don't think has necessarily played out at all of his stops. And it will be fascinating to see how he adapts to chaos ball, because the Warriors play chaos ball. Let's just just throw the ball all over the goddamn gym, run around, set screens, improvise everything. And that's not the way Chris has traditionally played. That's not necessarily a bad thing, because to your point, Kirk, maybe they get a different identity when instead of turning Jordan Poole into Diet Curry, maybe they just like, our second unit offense is going to be a Chris Paul offense. That said, he doesn't have the kind of pick and roll partner he usually would prefer to have. But, Looney's a really smart player who's become really good at that. You pair it with Draymond, that is interesting. I think they're trying to win the title. They should be trying to win the title. Steph Curry is Steph freaking Curry. As long as he's on your team, you have to be all in as you can be. They have kept the most valuable piece, I think, of at least the one they drafted, because they clearly missed the Wiseman pick by a lot, of the second timeline thing, and that's Kuminga. Yeah. And I think they're smart to hang on to Kuminga. And I like for Jordan Poole and maybe a fake first, I don't know what better win now player they were going to get than this.
Well, and it's a big team building move for the future too. Getting off the Poole contract alone is a triumph for the future of this team. But I had one Warrior source tell me, they don't just play chaos ball, Zach. They sort of play cadence ball. Like it looks chaotic, but there's a cadence, there's a heartbeat to that jazzy sort of motion that they have. Chris Paul's smart enough to slide in there. And I had one of my Warriors friends told me, like, at times Jordan Poole was just off rhythm with what they were trying to do. He was taking one or too many dribbles. He wasn't in the right place. Players were frustrated. You have to be a high IQ, sort of selfish basketball player to fit into what Steve Kerr has engineered there, to what they're trying to get Steph Curry and Klay Thompson open looks with. And yeah, if I've learned anything about Chris Paul, he's a versatile player. He's an offensive mastermind. And I think he'll be able to slide into almost any offensive scheme and match its cadence in a way that Jordan Poole simply wasn't. So I wanted to just add that.
Yeah, no, 100%. Yeah, for me, it's definitely about the money. It's a relatively clean way to get off that contract. If it's not working, clearly impetus to do that. But then, yeah, I just tend to think like the more high elite genius level basketball IQ players you throw in together, they usually figure it out. And like at this point in their careers, again, it's like, it's a good situation to manage Paul's minutes. And again, you think you made a great point. Like he'll probably have something in the tank in the playoffs. He's not going to have to burn it all in the regular season. And I'm actually excited to see what this looks like. The different combinations they can have, and sort of how it fits. I don't know. Like it didn't work with D'Angelo Russell as the other point guard, but that's because it's D'Angelo Russell, right? Like I don't think it precludes Steph from playing with another smaller guard.
Yeah, they'll definitely. Go ahead, Kirk.
No, I'm just going to ask him what he thought about their draft pick, because a lot of the nerds absolutely love their draft pick, Jeremy. I wanted to know what you thought of Brandon.
Yeah, Brandon Podziemski. I think it's a good pick. I mean, it is kind of a nerd pick, but it's funny because so Brandon is the type of guy like analytically graded out really, really well. I'm sure for a lot of people, and helped his stock a lot. But he's also like super, super competitive and driven. Sometimes almost like to a fault is sort of his reputation. It's not a bad thing, right? And if you throw him in a locker room where, oh look, there's Chris Paul, oh there's Steph Curry, like he's gonna like, I think, embrace that. I think it's a great situation for him. The question with him is just, he's kind of physically maxed out. He's not gonna like dunk on you. He's gonna be, crafty, drawing fouls, skill. I'm gonna have to make a lot of shots. I went and watched him work out in Milwaukee. I guess like a month or so ago, and was really impressed with the shot making and just his work ethic. And again, want to know workouts, but I think teams saw a lot of these same qualities of him. He took it really, really seriously, the whole pre-draft process. And, 6 months ago, we didn't think he was going to be in the first round, and he earned it. So that's the type of guy I think will vibe with what they're doing. He'll fall in right away. And I think maybe able to give them bench minutes and a little bit of extra scoring juice. So, again, to your point about the timelines, I think they've realized that, they tried that, but now it's like, well, the timeline is however many good years we're going to get out of Steph, and to a lesser extent, the other guys. So, now it's one timeline, and you can have young guys, but you gotta, you have to think about fit, I think, even more.
Yeah, I am interested to see how much they play Chris and Steph together. I mean, they moved away from the pool party, super small lineup, but Chris is obviously a tougher, more rugged and stronger defender than Jordan Poole. I just don't know how much physical pounding you want to subject Chris Paul to in like game 38 of the regular season. But will they play Chris, Clay, and Steph together? And how much? I mean, they will. How much? But to what degree? And like, where does Peyton fit in there? But this is going to be a really talented team. And if they stay healthy, they're going to be competitive in the West. And obviously, this probably increases the odds that Russ stays with the Clippers and D'Angelo Russell has a path back to the Lakers. But we'll see. I forgot about the Chris Paul chance coming out of the locker room. I don't that has I got to look back at that. It would be fun if they could remember how back in my early 20s, I'm not ashamed to admit, I dabbled in I watched WWE every now and then. Remember Kurt Angle?
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Remember how the fans used to chant, "You suck. You suck," to like the beat of his entrance music, and then it became like a term of endearment for him. Like it became a way for them to maybe the Chris Paul could turn into that for the Warriors now. Turn it into like whenever he does something like just nasty, but it helps the Warriors, like a flop, or although Chris would say he doesn't flop, of course, or like whatever. Everyone chants that. I think they should co-opt that. I don't know if I have any other. Draymond.
Oh man, Wendy got his fingers wagging on Draymond last night.
What did he say? What did he say?
Oh, he was doing this whole what's going on in Sacramento, and
yes.
Okay, you take it, Zach. You take it. My guy.
Okay, so Sacramento trades number 24 and Rashawn Holmes to Dallas, and we'll talk about Dallas. This is a good segue back into the draft. And all of a sudden it's like, whoa, Sacramento's got $30-something million of cap space.
Yeah.
And I said after the season, and I have not heard anything contradictory to this, didn't get any pushback on it, but I also haven't been digging deeply into Harrison Barnes's future in the last 3 months or 2 months. I said after the season that if I were a betting man, I would bet on Harrison Barnes being on a different team next year. It just felt to me like his time had served its purpose in Sacramento as like veteran leader, kind of jack of all trades, master of none, hybrid forward, helped this team reach a new level. Okay, we got there. It's time to use this salary slot on something that makes more sense for us long term. I still think that's probably true, and the events of last night made me think, ooh, that's very true. Now, is Draymond the target for the Sacramento Kings? I think Bill Simmons has brought that up. You're telling me that Windhorst did this about it. Certainly Vivek Ranadive, Warriors expat, loves all things Warriors. And if you love all things Warriors, there are a few things you love more than snarling Draymond Green, who just, by the way, also just stepped on your franchise center who's eligible for an extension. That's a thing too. You could basketball. If Chris Paul can be reintegrated into the Warriors, a stomp. And it was like a Super Mario Brother jump, like boink, it was a real thing. You can get around that. On Draymond, I do think the money's got to be close for him to go back to Golden State. I don't get the sense that he's going to take like a massive discount out of loyalty to the Warriors. But when you do what the Warriors just did, and you have Steph Curry, who loves Draymond Green, who's going to have a say in whatever the hell happens with this team, I just find it hard to believe that Draymond's going to go anywhere. Nothing would surprise me, like the Kings, maybe. I just mentioned the Pacers. There are any number of sign-in. I mentioned Memphis is a sign-in trade. Like they've got a lot of sign-in trade stuff. Like there's going to be options for him. The Warriors obviously have to participate in any sign-in trade, but the Kings have put themselves in a position where they don't need that necessarily. I don't know.
One other character, Mike Brown. Mike Brown, the defensive leader of the last championship team and very close with Draymond Green.
Okay. Before we get to that, Jeremy, educate me. The Mavericks tank out of the season despite trading for Kyrie Irving and having Luka Doncic on their team. Nope, we got to keep our pick. Got to keep it. Oh God, the Heat went from the play-in tournament to the finals. Oh my God, we have egg all over our face. Looks embarrassing. Then they trade down with Oklahoma City, and everyone laughs at them because no one can wait 3 seconds before firing off their most scorching takes that the world needs to hear. And they end up getting a guy that I think they wanted anyway, a guy who fits an archetype that Luka badly wants in Derek Lively. And then they right away take the trade exception they got and bring in Richaun Holmes, who's a great insurance big man. Like, I think Richaun Holmes can still play. And number 24, and with number 24, they take Omax Prosper. You're telling me that that's what we're going to call him. Please tell me about these two players that the Mavericks got, and if you think this is as good a night for the Mavericks, who don't just need players who fit around Luka Doncic, they need players who fit around Luka Doncic now, today. Was it that good of a night for them?
Yeah, I think it was a win for Dallas for sure. Just, I mean, purely from the perspective of, yeah, I agree. I think Lively was probably who they were taking anyway at 10 had there been no trade. My understanding of that trade for OKC, I think it was another situation where, look, Dallas had been marketing this pick for a couple weeks. Everyone knew it was available. They had a lot of calls. And I think when you see and everyone knows there's a pick like that, if you're worried at all about someone trading in for your guy, and again, this is another thing, it's sort of somewhat similar to what happened with Coulibaly and the Wizards to some extent. OKC, Cason Wallace is the guy they want. They're not going to take any chances. And again, this is why when you're a team that's either able to take contracts like they took Bertans, or load it up on picks or whatever, you can do with a little move like that. So for Dallas, it's, we get the guy we want anyway. We're paying him a little bit less slot value going back 2 picks. And then essentially swapping the Bertans money for the Holmes money, which is probably a more useful player. And then, yeah, and you get Prosper,
useful, like less expensive play. I think they say like
right.
$8 million total over the 2 years, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. Tell me about Prosper.
Yeah, Prosper, he had a good, really good showing for the first day of the combine. I think it wasn't, he did not come into the pre-draft process as a projected first-round pick, not for us. But it was clear, and I saw him a few times. Marquette is just not up the road from Chicago here, so I end up going there a few times a year. He has NBA physical tools. He's got the length. He's got big shoulders. He's more raw, I think, than you would hope for a guy who's had a few college seasons. But again, when you have that type of body and you play hard, if you just start not, you learn to knock down a shot. I mean, I don't know. They certainly have missed the Dorian Finney-Smith role, and I think that's probably what they're going to hope he can do in some amount of time for them. So I like what they did. I mean, you're doing Sacramento a favor and you get a free rookie out of it. Why not? And my understanding was that I think Boston was kind of after Omax at 25. So it worked out for Dallas. Good. I think it was good work.
Maybe that's why they traded down in their cascade of
exactly. That's what I think.
Cascade of picks.
That's what I think. Yeah.
Kirk, what else did you guys talk about regarding the Kings last night? I only had 2 screens active. I couldn't do 3, so I wasn't watching the YouTube special. What else did you talk about with the Kings? Just Draymond or?
Yeah, a lot of Draymond, Mike Brown, Harrison Barnes, Sabonis, like restructuring his deal. Can they now use some of the space to get into a more team-friendly extension with him and continue to build? But just adding to what Jeremy said on the draft, one of my big takeaways from the draft to continue on that Dallas point is who won the NBA draft? The state of Texas, because Dallas had a great draft night. I think Houston got 2 guys who were projected in the top 10 somehow, even because Whitmore fell so far. And then obviously my beloved San Antonio Spurs had a pretty good night. So, the state of Texas has had 3 great organizations, Zach, for a long time. There was that great stat about the Nuggets being the first team not from Texas or California to win from the West in a very long time. But for me, the draft really potentially is a resurrection of that Texas triangle in the NBA that our beloved Tim McMahon loves to cover so much. But a great night for all 3 Texas teams. But yeah, on the Sacramento thing, just like what's going on there, I think they have some flexibility, and they're in a lot better place than they were when we were talking about them 2 years ago. And they could be a factor in the West as well going forward.
So go ahead.
I just want to chip in one other funny note on Sacramento. I do think that if Chris Murray had fallen to 24, I think they were taking him. He was on, I think, a short list of guys for that pick. They would have reunited the Twins. They did not do that. That ended up not happening because he went one pick before. But I think they were hoping. But anyway, I just wanted to throw that in there. That would have been a fun outcome. But
it would be very annoying for Sacramento beat writers who have to like identify who's who at practices and shoot arounds and stuff without the numbers on the jersey.
One of them's left-handed. Chris is left-handed and Keegan's right-handed.
Ooh. Yeah.
So when they're shooting, you can tell. But other than that,
but we'd have the box score lineup stat problem of K Murray and K Murray, which is a nightmare. And we'd have to go KE, KR Murray. And sometimes NBA.com doesn't do that with the greens when JaMychal and Jeff are on the same. Anyway.
Great note.
So the Kings, Bobby Marks checked in with me last night. They have about $100 million in salary committed if they renounce Harrison Barnes, which give them 30-ish in room once you apply cap hold and stuff. And here's the thing. If it's renegotiating and extending Sabonis, that's going to take you out of the cap room game by itself because Sabonis is at 22, I think, next year. And so raising him up, if you're going to raise him up to his max, is going to eat up a lot of enough of that $30 million that you're not really in the game for a big free agent anymore. I want the Kings to do something more than just bump Sabonis up to his max and then just sort of take a couple of small bites, little guys here and there. Can't you go to Sabonis and be like, dude, you're an all-NBA player. You proved it last year. We love you. We can just max you out after the season. Let us use this cap room for something really good that can help our team because, hey, man, we just got the 3rd seed in the Western Conference. Like we're afraid of Denver. Like Denver's a problem. We're not that. Yeah, we lost in the first round. It was there for us though. Like we're not afraid of anybody. We're going for it. Let's go for it. And it doesn't have to be Draymond Green. Can I throw some names out there? It could be anybody. Like if the Clippers really ever got serious about trading Paul George, not a power forward, but it's an interesting name. Slide Murray to the 4, just go all shooting. Kyle Kuzma is a name that will come up. I'm a little wary of the next Kyle Kuzma contract. What about trying to steal Jeremy Grant from the Blazers? What if the Raptors ever got serious about trading Pascal Siakam? I don't know if the Kings have enough, though. Don't know if the Kings have enough. There's a million. You could go any number of ways. People threw Bruce Brown out there. I actually already think the Kings kind of have too many guards, and I realize you can guard up a position. They could be opportunistic, and like if the Knicks decide to move on from Obi Toppin, why not take a shot on him? Jalen McDaniels from Philly, take a shot on him. Maybe you can do Sabonis and do a couple of little things like that. Just trade them into whatever is left of your space. You could be the Grant Williams team. If you want to go that route, you can be like, we'll be the team that at the very least makes the Nets pay through the nose for Cam Johnson. Like there's a million directions you can go and that are not Draymond Green, and they got to be up to something because you're not a young team. You don't trade the 24 pick. And I know they went up from 38 to 34, I think, in the second round. You don't trade the number 24 pick unless you've got a couple of real actionable ideas.
I agree. Yeah. And the Draymond thing, though, if there's one word that I could say the Sacramento Kings need to sort of zero in on over the next 3 years to get to the next level, Zach, it is defense.
Stomping? Is it stomping?
It is stomping your opponent on the defensive end of the court.
Yeah, they need to improve their defense.
One of my favorite stats of this year was the Sacramento Kings are the best offense in the history of the NBA because their offensive efficiency was unprecedentedly high. But so we know their offense can hum and cook. But the thing is, I want to spend this cash, Zach Lowe, on a player that makes my defensive efficiency a better ranking in this NBA. Because as you mentioned, the Denver Nuggets aren't going anywhere. And they have an ability to score the basketball pretty well too. So the thing with Draymond is it's not only the Mike Brown reunion, it's not only the geographic proximity to where he currently lives and is raising his family. He's the perfect person to make them a defensive team right now. The offense will be great. He can come in and bring some of the names you mentioned. Jeremy Grant did come up last night. I think that's a nice fit, but he doesn't move that needle on the side of the court where this team needs to move the needle if they want to get to the next tier of contender status going forward.
Yeah, Grant Williams, I think, would be the only one of the guys I mentioned that would do that. And I mentioned Paul George sort of facetiously. Like, the thing about the Kings is they owe a protected pick to Atlanta still for Herter. So they're a little bit encumbered in how many picks they have. I can't believe I'm saying this about the Sacramento Kings, but you can't assume anymore that future Kings picks in the next 5 years are going to be like lottery tickets into the top 5. I can't believe I'm saying that. And they do need some defense, and Draymond would do. It would be interesting to see how their offense would fare, because Sabonis obviously is not a shooter. Fox's 3-point shot goes wildly up and down. They have shooting around those guys with Murray and Herter and Monk and all that. But a Draymond Sabonis front line with Fox as point guard, and Fox is a great mid-range shooter, but long range is like I said, up and down. It's an interesting fit, because what it really is a bet on IQ and movement, because what Sabonis and Draymond Green lack in outside shooting, they more than make up for in handoffs, passing, cutting, screening, pace. I mean, imagine the pace with both of those guys able to grab and go. I think the offense would take a hit, particularly in the half court, particularly in the playoffs when it slows down a little bit, but it might not be as big of a hit as people think, especially when you start thinking about, do we use Draymond Green as our backup center? Like, they don't have a backup center right now. Alex Len is entering free agency. Rashawn Holmes just got traded. I think the offense would take a hit. It would be a little clunky at times with the spacing, because, in place of Steph and Clay, you have De'Aaron Fox, who's not quite the mover and 3-point shooter, obviously, that any of those guys in Golden State are, not even close. But he's also a creative, high IQ player and a really good passer and a good mid-range shooter. It would be interesting. I'm kind of selling myself, because your initial reaction whenever you talk about two non-shooting bigs together is to poo-poo it. But Draymond's not your average non-shooting big. And this goes back to my whole thing with Draymond, is there's this whole school of thought about him that, what would his career have been if he didn't get drafted with the Warriors and now doesn't get to do his, high-flying playmaking stuff with the two greatest shooters of all time, who just happen to be two guys who are more than happy to work without the ball so he can work with it. And yeah, that fit helped Draymond become Draymond. I think it undersells his malleability and like how actually incredible he is as a playmaker, even leaving aside his defense. Now I'm talking myself into it.
You got your fingers wagging. and I do think, like, Vivek would love nothing more than to sort of drive a spike into that Warriors dynasty. And I don't think, for the record, I don't think this is happening. Ultimately, I believe that Draymond stays home with Stephen and Steve Kerr and that whole dynasty that they've built together, and tries to get another one in this new era. But I do think it's fair to say, like, Sacramento was posturing to try to make a run here, and it would make them very, very good. I love your point about this dribble handoff. You don't necessarily have to space the floor to be a big man, but these guys are offensive savants. You can run really complex actions and trust that they're going to find the shooters, the Herters, find the Fox on the cut. They're really talented offensive players. So I think it's a little sort of basic to be like, their offense would be kind of stagnant. No, these guys aren't stagnant offensive bigs at all, Zach. You're exactly right to point that out.
I think their offense would take some time, and it would be clunky at times, and maybe not be as just sort of clean and easy. And it would take I think their per possession production would drop a little bit, but maybe not as much as people think. Jeremy, before we go, Orlando at 6-11, Anthony Black and Jet Howard. Tell me about your reaction to that.
I loved the Anthony Black pick. That was kind of what I suspected would end up happening. He's one of my favorite players in the draft, and he kind of falls in line when we were looking at what Orlando might do. He falls in line just from like a size and feel standpoint with what they love. I think they wanted to get bigger in the backcourt. You have the luxury of having these two like supersized offensive engine type of players in Banchero and Wagner, and you put in a guy who's not only a smart passer and very unselfish, but also a guy who can defend all over the court, is in the right place a lot. He's going to have to get better at shooting for sure. But I love the Anthony Black pick. And I think he might end up being, he might outkick that draft slot at number 6 when it's all said and done, but he's got to be more aggressive as a scorer. But I think some of that will be mitigated on that team where they can play a pretty like stylish type of basketball with him. The Jet Howard pick was the first pick in this draft that I was actually surprised by. Just I think we knew, and it's funny, like we had talked a lot about how Orlando needed shooting, but we were connecting them to other shooters. And in my mind, like I had heard a lot that Howard might be slipping. Didn't anticipate him going that high. I think I totally understand the logic with that pick. It may not have been what I would have done. I wasn't 100% sure when I saw it, how I felt about it, and I'm still processing. But in theory, Jet is the type of shooter that they need around those other guys, and he can defend. And look, if they're rolling out in a year, let's say, the lineup with Black, Howard, Banchero, Wagner, and a big, that's potentially like a huge team that can shoot, where all the players can make plays a little bit. That's like a really, really interesting and very modern, so to speak, basketball team.
This is your expertise, Jeremy. Parting thought. Give me a pick, could be a deep cut or not a deep cut, that you either just loved, or even today you're like, what in the hell happened with that pick? I hate that pick. One or both of those.
Yeah, I loved this is an easy one, but I loved the Jaime Jaquez Miami fit. I've kind of been a fan of his for like 3 years, since watching them in the NCAA tournament when we were all like stuck in Indy during that COVID tournament, and UCLA made that Final Four run out of the play-in round. I love his toughness. It's very stereotypical Heat, but it's I think will work really well. I liked what Brooklyn did. Ended up staying both at 21 and 22 and just going super young, like taking 2 teenagers who don't need to play right away for them. I think that's pretty interesting with Noah Clowney and Derek Whitehead. I always go back and I don't really have picks to like bash, and it's not like that's what I do, but I guess like LA at 17, Hood Schifino fell there, wasn't my favorite player. I don't know. There was a lot of guys on the board. And then I also thought Houston, obviously, with Whitmore falling to 20, I was a little surprised no one wanted to take that swing. And I know, there were a range of concerns there, and that type of thing can snowball because, like yesterday, over the course of the day, I had a lot of teams in the 10 to 20 range hitting me up like, wait, Whitmore might be here. What's the deal? And I think, that was going around, everyone realizing that could happen.
Starting around 16. My phone started to ring with messages that Houston was going to be the Whitmore team.
Yes.
I don't know why. I guess people 17, 18, 19, those teams, including the Lakers, I guess people knew by then, like, it's not going to be them.
Yeah. And it was interesting because that was kind of how, and I think, Jonathan Gavoni and I had talked about this, but like the way that the draft lined up, and it helped our mock in the end, which ended up being pretty accurate. I think we had like 18 of the first 24 picks.
You got in the middle of the first round. You guys were rolling. I was looking. I had a couple of the mock drafts. I'm like, man, they're on a roll right now.
Yeah. We obviously we're pretty happy about it, but I think like you had LA at 17, Miami at 18, Golden State 19. Those are 3 teams that are perennially trying to win. So kind of gave you an idea of where they're going to go. And those are teams who are not afraid to just take their guy. I think you could look at the track record of all those teams, and Whitmore being there, I'm sure they were like, but ultimately, you stick to the plan. You're not going to go off script at the last second for an 18-year-old who you don't know if he'll help you or not next year. And you don't know about the bill of health. So it wasn't like totally shocking that he got that far once he began to fall. But I am still a little surprised he got to 20, and I think that's probably really good value for Houston. I know Houston was thrilled to get a player who they at least thought about for number 4 for a bit, then get him 16 picks later. Doesn't happen often.
Everyone is thrilled. Everyone always got everyone way higher or way lower than they had them on their board. Everyone's like, oh, he was number 8 on our board. We were thrilled to get him at 13. Jeremy Woo, you and Gavoni, just an incredible tag team on the draft. Kirk Goldsberry, just analysis up and down. What's your next piece, Kirk? What are we going to look for from you?
Hey, baby, I'm going to Vegas. I'm going to go watch this French teenager in the desert, and I'm going to write a preview piece. I'm going to react. Hopefully we get to see this young man hoop in the NBA Summer League, and I'll be all over that, Zach. So I cannot wait. Hopefully we'll get some tacos out there in Vegas as tradition.
Your first 1B experience.
It will be.
I'm very excited. I love Las Vegas in July. I mean, everybody does. You can't argue with it. I look forward to losing a little bit of money and having some beverages and doing some work. Thank you guys. Be well. Have a good weekend.